Hey, am I good? Am I good? Yes, I hear myself. Yes. Um, I want to thank Leah, Gwen, and Adam for hiring me to be on staff, and also the staff for being just fantastic humans. And I want to give a shout out to the real MVPs of this conference: Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Yes. I'm going to read two poems, one old, one new, and a short story that's going to be coming out this fall in high school textbooks in America. So I'm really excited about that. So I decided to read that today. Yeah. All right. And so for this first poem, the only thing you need to know is that I spent probably 3 decades. I was raised Muslim. I spent 3 decades of my life like pretty covered. And a question I got asked a lot is, "Where are you from?" I have not been asked that since I stopped covering, so that's really interesting. At Lisa's going away luncheon. I want to ask my boss's boss's boss if he's stupid or just plain dumb after he takes one look at my hijab and asks me where I'm from in Southeast Asia. I tell him that it's New Jersey, actually, and he asks where my parents are from, and my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, and their parents, and their parents' parents, as if searching for some other blood, as if searching for some reason why some black Muslim girl from Newark wound up seated next to him at this restaurant of tablecloths and laminated menus. I want to say slavery, bitch, but I've got a car note and rent and insurances and insurances and insurances and credit cards and credit debt and a loan and a bad tooth and a penchant for sushi, so I drop the bitch, but I keep the truth. Tell me, he says, why don't Sunnis and Shiites get along? Tell me, he says, what's going on in Iraq? Tell me, he says, what's up with Saudi and Syria and Iran? Tell me, he says, why do Muslims like bombs? I want to shove an M1 up his ass and confetti that pasty flesh in a tailored suit. Instead, I'm sipping my unsweetened iced tea, looking at the 12 coworkers sitting at the table, none of whom, not one, look back at me. Rather, they do the most American things they can do. They praise their Lord, they stuff their faces, and pretend they don't hear him, and pretend they don't see me. And this poem is kind of newer. I don't know how many of you were sitting at home not taking showers, but I was one of those people. I was not writing. I just watched a lot of CNN, and I watched a lot of Contagion, which is a great movie. We're still in the pandemic. I don't know if you like one of those people who don't like watching Titanic while the ship's sinking, but and so this was written after the third time of watching Contagion. What Contagion got wrong about a pandemic in America? More conspiracy theories, as in democratic hoax, as in Soros, as in man-made, as in labs, as in 5G, as in towers. The conspiracy theorists using conspiracy theories from conspiracy theorists to corroborate conspiracy theories for the conspiracy theorists. The right way to write, I am so sorry for your loss. I am so sorry for your loss. I am so sorry for your loss. The correct number of times to call the parents to listen to them breathe. The numbers in the African American community, as in the 6% of African Americans in Wisconsin who make up 40% of fatalities, as in the 30% of African Americans in Chicago who make up 68% of fatalities, as in the 32% of African Americans in Louisiana who make up 72% of fatalities, as in we need more numbers, as in history repeats. The correct number of times to call the sister working the COVID unit to listen to her breathe. The correct number of times to start a poem and never finish. The right way to write, I am so sorry for your loss. The credits, as in expect an ending. Now, my story is called, I guess probably at the Percival Everest erasure in a way, but erasure. Danielle Holmes was the first recorded disappearance. We didn't notice right away. She had always been a quiet one, respectful, never speaking unless spoken to, never sitting at the conference table during meetings, opting instead to stand in the back. It was about a week into her disappearance, in the middle of our monthly meeting, after the team lead asked her to forward him the productivity rates for last quarter's batches, we wait 2, 3, 4 seconds for her soft voice to say, okay, before glancing at her usual standing spot and seeing only the wall. Maybe she left early for a dental appointment, someone said. What makes you so sure she went to the dentist, another person asked. It could have been the doctors. The rest of us thought about the last time we'd seen her, and someone narrowed it down to Thursday last week when she stood behind him in line holding oatmeal and a cup of coffee. When Joanna Petite-Frere left work late that evening, she noticed Danielle's Elantra in the corner of the lot, unlocked, empty Chobani yogurt containers littered on the passenger seat, a small generic brand name purse lying on the side on the floor. Joanna called the police to do a wellness check. They had a few others to complete ahead of her, but when they finally checked Danielle's house, nothing was amiss. Maybe we reasoned she went on vacation and forgot to upload her leave to the company's Outlook calendar. But her purse? Joanna asked. No. No woman ever forgets her purse. Joanna disappeared 2 days later. Unlike Danielle, we considered Joanna loud, angry. She had a 6-inch afro, stormed around the office in these impossible 6-inch heels, clacked the keys on her keyboard, and some of us felt spoke a bit too loudly on conference calls, sometimes slipping into Haitian Creole when she wanted to curse. Rumor has it that when HR called her in to talk about embracing her quieter side, she demanded to know who had filed the complaint. She came to each cubicle, eyeing us, questioning of us. None of us, of course, knew anything. On the day she disappeared, it only took a few hours to realize she was gone. 1 minute we heard her chattering on the phone, clacking on her keyboard. The next, silence. We thought her call had dropped. When Terrell Davis went by her cubicle to drop off some folders and discuss upcoming travel to Rock Island, he found a pair of stilettos, but no Joanna. He waited for a while. Later, he told us his first thought was that she had to defecate. You mean shit? One of us snickered. Terrell had a habit of being a bit too, how should we say it, uppity at work. Terrell's second thought was that she snuck out of work early. But Joanna in a bathroom without her shoes? Joanna leaving work without her shoes? This we cannot imagine. At home, our partners grumbled about people missing too much work. Our children talked about the increased absences from their classes, their sports teams, their after-school programs. Our bosses called meetings and gave stern lectures on no calls, no shows. Apparently, the lazy, as our bosses called them, had decided to stop working. We were warned that if we tried something similar, if we dared show up late, we would immediately be fired. Behind our backs, we checked cabinets for hidden cameras and wondered if this was some type of government conspiracy, or if we were being pranked, or if we were on a show like Undercover Boss. That was until Terrell disappeared right in front of us. He had been calling IT for days and couldn't get through. In the midst of begging a couple of us to go across the street and up 16 stories to convince IT to send someone over to unlock Joanna's computer, we noticed we could see the fire alarm handle through jagged notches in his neck. It was like someone or something was removing him in large, scrubbing circles from the bottom up with a huge #2 pencil eraser. Even after he was gone, and we were left staring at that unobscured fire alarm, we heard his last words. Really, I would do it myself, but... Those of us who saw him disappear, and those of us who heard how he disappeared, feared we were next. We poked our heads into cubicles to make sure we were still there. We dialed up each other's extensions, whispered into headsets, but can you really hear me? And breathed sighs of relief when the voice on the other end said, yes, I hear you. We traveled to the CAF in groups of 4. There was no rhyme or reason to that number, it just felt safe. If 1 disappeared, 3 would still be there. 2 disappeared, 2 would still be there. We text each other late at night, are you still there? And bit our nails ragged, waiting for replies. We expanded our groups to 5, and then 6, and then 7. We kept track of those who had disappeared from our company. Danielle Holmes, Joanna Petite-Frere, Terrell Davis, Jihan Overby, Dwayne Grady, Oba Cole, Shakur Simmons, Raida Teller, Laverne Hamilton, Sarah Herrera, Shakima Bankston, Ama Olabisi, Tashana Glover, Adeola Lawal, Sarah de la Luz, Mason de la Cruz, Nafisa Muhammad, Vivian Atis. Couples went to sleep as couples. One of them would wake up the next morning in a cold bed single. One of us woke up to an empty house, both wife and children gone. Adopted children disappeared. Those of us who still had children learned through emails, texts, and letters sent home that their classrooms would be condensed due to the lack of students, teachers, teachers' aides, and janitors. We'll get through this, they assured us, though no one could define what this was. Principals nervously stepped foot into classrooms they had abandoned decades ago. Our children gathered in smaller groups, tried to learn their lessons, tried to ignore the empty desk. Every day they came home and asked us when their friends were coming back. Every day they asked us if they were next. We had no answers for them. Our bosses started to hire people off the streets, unqualified individuals who did not understand batches, programming, productivity, quirky computers. Most of us were appalled, though some did say, "I like it better this way." When our garbage cans overflowed and our refrigerators stank, our bosses made us clean. We hosed our sidewalks, squeegeed our windows. IT never overcame its backlog, so we sent out what orders we could and canceled others. When a number of our clients disappeared and our order numbers dropped, our bosses fired the unqualified individuals and required the rest of us to put in 15 hours, 18 hours. The world leaders convened, pundits pundited, discussing subjects we dared not talk about before, taboo topics that had been relegated to pop quizzes in our high school history classes. Questions like, in what year was the Emancipation Proclamation signed, and in what year did apartheid end? Only these topics were discussed more directly, filled with details and an overload of accusatory information that made us want to turn a channel or switch off the phones. But our curiosity, our search for understanding, wouldn't let us. From these pundits, we learned it wasn't just huge swaths of inner cities and whole towns in the South, especially in Mississippi and Alabama, that had disappeared. The world. The world also had to contend with the disappearance of people from whole islands in the Caribbean. We never knew Hispaniola contained both Dominican Republic and Haiti until that aerial shot on CNN showed the emptiness of both sides. Certain areas of London, suburbs of places like Paris and Hamburg, and most of the population of the continent of Africa. We understood there was a particular calculation to these disappearances, but not the exact calculation, the exact percentage one had to be to disappear. One pundit laughed and remarked that while these people were gone, at least those remaining had unfettered access to their islands, their beaches, and their food, without conflict, without war, without fear, that perhaps we can go to these places, build, and finally establish civilization. Another pundit angrily pointed out that it was not their land, and if it had not been for these people in this country, we might not have wealth, the traffic light, X-ray spectrometry, the pacemaker, open heart surgery, the HVAC keeping the other pundit so smugly comfortable in his seat, soul food, dry cleaning, rhythm, scapegoats, spices. The leader of our nation assured us this was a large protest, a publicity stunt of magnanimous proportions. The leader urged the public to stop talking about the disappearances because that was what they wanted. Attention, distraction. The disappearances will stop, he claimed, when they realized their tactics wouldn't work. We didn't stop whispering, the pundits didn't stop punditing, but in a way, he was right. The disappearances stopped. 1 month passed, and then 4, and there weren't any more recorded disappearances. A number was released. 18.5% of the world's population was gone. Some hoped they would come back and things would go back to normal. Some liked them gone. Not a day went by without them crossing everyone's minds. Not a day went by we wondered if they, wherever they were, thought about us. Some of the others left, understanding that if this happened again, they would be next. They moved far away and took with them doctors, lawyers, senators, programmers, nail estheticians, professors, dishwashers. They didn't go back to their native countries per se, but they grouped together and lived amongst each other as if something was wrong with us, as if we were the cause of the disappearances. Good, a couple of us said. The rest of us did not say anything. A few of us stopped working. We withdrew our children from school and kept them home. We read books and plays to them, getting choked up when we came across a particular word, a favorite picture, and realized we, too, were teaching them history of ways of life long gone. We listened to our favorite song, or watched our favorite movie, or watched a sports classic on ESPN, understand we've seen and heard the laughter from that person, go into our bathrooms, shut the doors, and cry. Those of us who continue to work continue our whispered discussions. Some thought we were living in a simulation that we reached level 2 in a game we couldn't quite figure out. Some thought it was God giving us a sign for better or for worse. We were unsure, and that uncertainty made it worse. We liked our signs to be specific, detailed with solid metaphors and a clear delineation between good and evil. Aliens, the rest of us conjectured. It wasn't just our children's theories, it was ours. Aliens had taken them to outer space. What else could it be? One night, after 20 hours of work, we grabbed our stashes of bourbon and brandy and rode the elevator to the top floor of our building. We passed around flasks. We drank. We waited and waited. Surely, if God wanted to save people, why them? Surely, if this was all a simulation, who was trying to prove what? Surely, if aliens had come to our strange planet, why would they only take them? We pummeled our chests, tilted our pale faces to the stippled sky and bellowed, why not us? Why didn't you take us? Thank you. And I want to bring up, we're very excited to have Bea Troxel come up here, and we have a guitar up here, so we're in for some good stuff. All right.
The timer is calming. Okay. Thank you, Gwen and Adam and Leah, for bringing me back. Thanks to the staff. I love you all. And thanks to everyone who is here for the conference. It's really been just a delight this year. I'm going to read a piece I've been writing about my obsessions during the pandemic, and then I'm going to play a song that I wrote about one of the obsessions during the pandemic. Okay. I keep asking my students what they're obsessed with. It's a class of 16-year-olds relegated to small Zoom boxes on my screen. I can see that they all have their walls covered in cartoon posters and glow-in-the-dark stars and paintings. I have recently found out that in real life they are so tiny. My loudest student takes up half the space that I imagined she did when I saw her on Zoom. A few of them answer: boba tea, Gilmore Girls, sushi. One especially tiny one says Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I see a flurry of other hands fly up to snap an agreement. Several of them say they aren't really obsessed with things. They shrug their shoulders. They pass it on to the next person. I ask them this because I want my students to know what a good and beautiful thing it is to follow what interests them. In my mind, an obsession is anything you can't shake, that which you love despite your inner judgments. Obsessions take over, but we also choose to let them take over. It was not until my mid-20s that I started giving weight to what I was naturally curious about. I had just fallen in love with a woman for the first time, something that took me off guard. I had not suspected or known until that point that I might be queer, and as I entered into this new territory, I began to give more credit to art and writing that had always seemed too emotional, too easy to read, too soft on the mind. Who had deemed it as such, I do not know, but all of a sudden I stopped editing and criticizing my impulses. The person I loved kept showing me new authors: Maggie Nelson, Anne Carson, Greta Gerwig, I know. But I was so enamored by these writers, I would not have let myself love in the past. And it's not that I would not have liked them. I just thought that they weren't proper enough to love, didn't contain enough depth, as if our curiosities and interests can be ranked against each other. Ocean Vuong said that as he wrote his novel, he thought about Moby Dick. He said he wanted to be just as uncompromising in following his curiosities as Herman Melville was in his. The first obsession started in the fall of 2019, shortly after a breakup where I would go on long walks focusing on every red leaf I passed. One friend suggested I hold on to stones until I no longer felt sad, and soon enough I was looking at a jar full of smooth rocks, a way to see my grief situated. I held on to anything that helped me to escape for just a little bit: the gray light of a driving to Michigan in the snow, the warm, steamy house after cooking a whole chicken with a friend. I read Middlemarch and created a 3D book report on it, taking miniature dolls and gluing them to little planks of wood. From there, I moved on to Endeavour, a British mystery show. I swore that I'd never seen a more beautiful protagonist in my life. I swore that he slowed my life down. I went to a bar alone for the first time and sat at a dark, plant-clustered table. And while I wanted this experience to feel pivotal and introspective, I mostly thought about how I was being perceived. But I went on walks. I noticed details of my neighborhood like they were clues leading me to a bigger mystery. These obsessions were giving shape to my life. And then I began to feel the loneliness, that deep, sinking, creeping feeling. I became obsessed with that, too. I learned that loneliness begets loneliness, and in a study published by Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, I learned that people suffering from social isolation may be more prone to inflammation and less able to fight viral infections. I made zines about the research from another survey that lonely people often feel they're reaching out or listening to other people more than other people are reaching out or listening to them. I wrote out manifestos about how I would connect. Even still, I wrote, I'm choosing to believe, actively choosing, I tell you, that I am loved, that I am worthy, because I'm not going to try to find more reasons to be alone. And this obsession, too, subsided slowly, as loneliness does. It eased away, and I started to feel alone again, the good kind of alone. So right as the pandemic descended, I was ready to be inside with myself. It was mid-Lent, and I'd given up watching TV alone as my Lenten practice. Without TV, I found the obsessions continuing, but they moved faster. I fell in love with a cartoonist who had a piece in the New Yorker about her elementary school crush. I found PDFs of her older work. I messaged her on Instagram, hoping she would get what I meant. I'm in love with you, was the subtext of my question about whether her zine would be published again. She didn't. She just thanked me for the compliment on her cartoon work. I hopped through my obsessions with Julio Torres, Ocean Vuong, and Hugh Grant within the span of a month. I had a file of Adele Heinel's pantsuits saved on my phone. I made tiny zines, I gardened, I went on long walks, I talked to friends, and mostly just wanted to be alone with my obsessions. Summer hit, and during a week when I was sick in bed, I had the audacity to start Riverdale, a show about teenagers played by extremely hot 28-year-olds based loosely on the Archie comics. There was something about the vast inconsistencies, the dark noir, and the blurred characterization that kept me watching it. I wrote a song about it, I downloaded Hinge because of it, I talked about it with anyone who could engage, but most people didn't. Everything in life seemed to relate to it. It was the only thing that seemed more wild than the actual world I was living in. But Riverdale was too intoxicating and exhausting to live in. It was sapping me of my joy. Were these obsessions some way for me to give structure and meaning to my life? Was I busying myself with these people, these concepts, these shows as a way to stay focused and alive? Perhaps these obsessions were my adult way of finding the sacred in the ordinary, making the mundane bearable. But I was still looking for something to latch onto, something that would slow me down. I firmly believe I might not have become obsessed had I not first given myself permission to love what I loved. And let me tell you, I loved what I loved. Post-Riverdale, Buffy took over, a show that slowed my life down, that I loved, but that gave me enough space to reflect. I would watch an episode and spend the next day thinking about monsters who couldn't speak, or Buffy working in a burger shack, or Spike's slow transformation. Sometimes the parallels felt too strong. Navigating post-college life as a slayer has a lot of existential meanderings, and it felt too real for me to engage with. But I had finally found my obsession match. I had found a place where I could sit for a while, settle in, breathe in the smells of graveyards and steaks and books. Even with the show's flaws, and even as I grapple with the news that has come out about the show's creator, I'm still grateful for this final obsession of the pandemic. Within my obsessions, I had finally found something that directed me out into the world. I was hopping from thing to thing to thing because I wanted to find something that would stop me in my tracks, hand me a drink, and then say, why don't you sit and think about this for a while? But I also wanted to be taken somewhere new, to be startled, to feel. I am lucky to have found this in my life, to have been startled, in many ways, into a new life. And this startling happened through leaning into the honesty of loving something, someone. Now I'm going to play you a song about Riverdale. I was really inspired by Milo yesterday. Josie. Can you hear that? Okay, great. Is Josie out there singing the perfect tune? Never seems to practice and always seems to croon. How do these teenagers get away with such a lazy habit day by day? Is Archie out there kissing Miss Grundy? Hardly unnoticed when she leaves, conveniently murdered, and Archie seems fine. How to get away with crossing all these lines? Because it's all in a day at Riverdale. Yes, it's all in a day at Riverdale. Oh. Jughead Jones is the best of them all. Fights for Betty and he cares for the small. But do we see the consequence of him getting killed in every season that's been filmed? Because it's all in a day at Riverdale. I think I downloaded Hinge because of Riverdale. So much love, so much sex, and no consequence. So much love, so much sex, and no consequence. Dark Betty, where'd you go? Dark Betty, where'd you go? I know she's out there in her wig, and when she gets back it won't make sense. Think I downloaded Hinge because of Riverdale. Yes, it's all in a day at Riverdale. So much love, so much sex, and no consequence. So much love, so much sex, and no consequence. So much love, so much sex, and no consequence. Thank you.